Hi, I'm Ryan Reynolds. As owner of Mint Mobile, I couldn't wait to make my first commercial for Spotify listeners. I thought, I'll tell them to go to mintmobile.com/Spotify to get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Then I thought, they'll never believe the owner bragging, so I'll bring on a real Mint customer who knows it's premium wireless for just $15 a month. Then I thought, how will they know it's not just me acting as a customer? Then I thought, what if they don't think I'm a good enough actor to play a customer? Then I cried and went to bed the end.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Con Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Today, I'm joined by former NFL coach Brad Childress because he knows Eric Bienemy very well. Childress was a coach in Philadelphia when Bienemy finished his career there. He also hired him to be his running backs coach when Childress coached the Vikings. He hired Bienemy and Bienemy worked with him for several years. And then the two of them worked together in Kansas City. You can hear why Childress told Andy Reid that, yes, Bienemy was ready to be an offensive coordinator in Kansas City. More insight there. I do feel like Bienemy is one of the most scrutinized assistant coaches in history. So I don't want to kind of go over all the same things every single time, but I do want to bring you insight from people who worked with him, who know him very well. That's what I'm doing here. So stay tuned to that. In 1 minute, I'll get to that. I do want to go over a couple little minor things. First of all, the Bienemy presser is on Thursday, of course, at the Commander's facility. I will be doing a podcast later that day with Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders, as we talk about first impressions being around Bienemy. This is an all Bienemy week. That's on Thursday morning. The other thing is, as far as staff changes, and I told you the other day, I didn't expect a lot of big changes here. Still don't. We know that wide receivers coach Drew Terrell likely going to be, or at least very good chance he'll be the pass game coordinator in Arizona. Now, I don't think it's official yet, but that's what I'd heard last week, and that's been kind of true throughout the week. Nothing is, until something's done, it's not done, but that's what we're hearing there. And then Jim Hostler, who's an senior offensive assistant with Washington, he is out. He had been here for the first few years with Rivera. That's probably the one big change that Washington will make. I don't know that there will be any. I'm not anticipating any other big changes on that offensive staff. I don't know. I do believe Bienemy will bring some people aboard. I don't know the roles. I don't know if any titles are going to change. Find all that out. I may even know that by Wednesday afternoon. So if you want to find out, go to Twitter where I'm at John_Kine. Anyway, also state for the Bienemy presser, don't forget, I will be covering that, of course, for ESPN. So I'll have a story up on all the stuff that he said on ESPN.com on Thursday afternoon. And so tune in for that. And again, I told you, Adam Teicher, our Chiefs reporter, and I we combined on it basically a lot of information on Bienemy for an article after he was hired, but it provides a lot of insight into him, into what he's getting into here, why he came to Washington, all that good stuff. But we'll hear from the man himself on Thursday morning. All right. And then one thing on the ownership situation, not a whole lot new to add there. I know there's always going to be stuff floating around. The only thing I know is that, again, Jeff Bezos is still out there. What I do know is that we know Josh Harris toured the facility, that group. We also know that there were a couple of other unnamed groups who have toured the facility. I know Nikki Javal from the Washington Post reported that. I had heard that a week or two ago that the groups there was thought that one or two groups would be coming through. Well, it turns out they have. So there you go there. And then the Jeff Bezos thing is still hanging out there. And I know there are some people involved in the situation who they're well aware of how he's hovering over the entire process. And one thing that this person told me, that because the Bezos group has not ruled out that he would do something, they're kind of figuring that he's going to factor in somewhere at some point. But until you say you're out, you're not out. So that's general stuff. You may have already known that. There you go. Anyway, that's enough from me. Now, let's get to my interview, my conversation with former NFL coach Brad Childress.
This episode is sponsored by State Farm. Buying insurance can be complicated, and you might have a lot of questions, like, what if my policy doesn't cover that? Or, what if I need to make a claim in the middle of the night? Good news, State Farm is there for all your what-ifs. You can reach them 24/7, talk through any questions with your agent, and you can even file a claim on the State Farm mobile app. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com to get a quote today.
This is live from PS5. Let's go now to our first story.
The good people of Manhattan woke up to a gift from their favorite hero.
Om det här är filmvinter eller inte så är
Experts are linking all of these events to an increase in activity on PS5.
This was live from PS5, bringing you the extraordinary.
Rated RP2M.
PlayStation.
Brad, you have obviously a lot of experience with Eric Bienemy, and I'm kind of asking anybody who knows him, what do you think Washington is getting in Bienemy?
Well, I think they're getting an incredibly passionate football coach. He loves what he does. He can be emotional, which football's an emotional game sometimes. But a guy that's competed at the very highest level, a guy that's coached at the very highest level, and obviously with a really interesting offense. With that said, they'll be passing, but, he has a lot of respect for being able to run the football. And anytime you can play good defense and stop the run and run the ball is a pretty good formula.
You had him on your staff at Minnesota. You hired him to be there. I think that was his first NFL job. What is it that you saw in him as a young coach that made you want him to be on your staff?
Yeah, so John, he was on in 1999 was his last year of playing. I was at the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was primarily a special teams guy, a special teams captain, back, third string running back. But what I recognized was that here's a guy that in his last year played 9 years, a smaller guy. He had to come out an hour before practice even started just to get himself warm and loose, to participate in the practice. And he was that way every day when we went up to Allentown for training camp. And that really hit me. And then we brought him back about 3 years later as a training camp intern. And you could tell he was a great teacher. Sometimes good players aren't great teachers. But he was very good in that area too. And there was no doubt in my mind when I got the Vikings job that the running back coach I was going to go get is Eric Bienemy. He was on Carl Durrell's staff at that time at UCLA.
What did you see in him as far as you say great teacher? What were some of the things that you remember maybe stood out to show you that?
Well, when you coach running backs, you're so involved in things like the path of the back, course integrity, and then in the passing game, precision route running. He was able to teach that. And then the pass protection element of them. You're involved in as a running back coach in everything, every facet of it. And I thought he had a great command of all those facets.
And then you also, I think you would talk to you about like Chester Taylor when he went from the Ravens to the Vikings, and just the demanding nature of Bienemy. And I shouldn't say demanding nature. I think that's just maybe basic. But what is it do you remember about what Taylor maybe learned about Bienemy?
Well, Chester was coming out of a backup role at the Ravens, and he was going to be the lead dog for us at the Bears. Unbeknownst to us, we, at that point in time, we didn't know we were going to draft Adrian Peterson the next year. But, Chester rushed for over 1,000 yards, and he had to learn, at least in our system, that we don't do it the same way as the Ravens. Just because you're a number one running back and you carry the ball 23 times a day before or a couple of days before it doesn't mean that you sit out practice. You got to get in there. You got to take your turns. You got to take your reps. And that was something that was new to him because that's not the way they had done it at the Ravens. And so he really had to indoctrinate him to what it is to be a lead dog for everybody to see you show up and be consistent in all areas and practice and that type of thing.
And then there, obviously, that with that passion and that his demanding nature, whatever, is going to come some sideline arguments. We've seen some of those over the years. What do you take from those? I mean, I know like like you said, football is a passionate sport. So it could just be a heat of the moment thing and then it's gone because guys are competitive. But what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I don't see any downside to passion at all. You in a lot of ways, if you can't get yourself going, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're just throwing your hat in the ring. And so, there's sideline arguments, there's practice arguments, there's practice discussions. Everybody has a different point of view, but he was very able to get his points across. It wasn't just because there was an argument or a disagreement, because he was trying to present a point that he had covered, and he wasn't seeing it done that way, and he wanted it done a certain way.
And then how do you balance that line for you as a head coach, to like, okay, this is what he's doing and saying versus, rein it in a little bit? Is there a line to balance, or do you just say, hey, this is EB?
No, I think there's a line to balance, and that always comes from the head coach. But I hired him for a reason. I mean, right. He was a good run back in the NFL. He was a good teacher, and you know what? I like that passion. I like that fire. We're not talking about a flatline guy who speaks in a monotone. I think that gets players excited when they see the coach excited.
Absolutely. And when because you were with him in Kansas City as well, under Andy Reid's staff, and I remember reading something from you when you were leaving with Nagy that Andy asked you if Eric was ready to ascend.
Right.
What do you remember about that, and what did you tell him?
Yeah, he said, what do you think about me hiring Eric as the next offensive coordinator? I said, he's the guy you got to hire. He's the guy with the most experience here. He understands it forward and backward. He was a great running back coach there at the time he did that, but he stepped in that role. And I don't know what the growing pains were, because like you said, I exited at that point in time as well. But I mean, to do it for 5 years now, you're not just sitting on your duff. You're right. Andy's a hard worker. EB's a hard worker. And obviously they've not, you never forget that the difference between effort and results. That doesn't, results is what you want. He's gotten results, but he also puts in a lot of effort.
Right. And then, what is it as an offensive coordinator with a guy like Andy Reid, who's been a fantastic offensive coach for many years? What is the role of the offense? You serve in that role. What is the role of an OC under Andy, and what is their input?
Yeah, so he's basically going to sit in all the quarterback meetings. Andy sat in all those along with Matt Nagy. When I was there, I sat there with Matt Nagy and Andy, Alex Smith, Pat Mahomes, Tyler Bray, Chase Daniel. There are a whole bunch of different people, but you sit in those meetings, and then you order plays. These are the plays I like, and then you listen to your quarterback about what order do you like them in. But you organize all those thoughts, and then you put them on a piece of paper for the head coach, who's been following along the whole time as well, and he's got his own thoughts about what he likes. So I think that administration part of it is huge as well. Whether you're directing the offensive line coach, the Coach Heck, in their case at Kansas City, or you're directing the receiver coach Joe Blameyer, or the new running back coach Greg Lewis. Hey, that's not right. This is how we got to get it done. Or hey, let's do it differently.
I don't suppose you saw LaShawn McCoy kind of came out hard against Bienemy. He was there just a short time, but did you see any of his comments by any chance?
I heard they were negative comments. I don't know LaShawn McCoy, but I'm sure it's from, hey, I don't care if you're an old pro, you still need to do stuff this way. And it probably was no different than his conversations at the time with Chester Taylor, and you may have done it this way at the Eagles, but you're in Kansas City now, and here's how we do it here.
Yeah. And then, because the other thing he said too, that during meetings, he wouldn't have any input, but based on what you're saying, an OC there has a lot of input.
A lot of input, and never very far away from what he thinks the good runs would be against that group, and what their line can accomplish. And football at its best is a physical game, and so there's nothing better than, a running back that can run the ball behind a good offensive line. I mean, it's a great way to set up all your play action and those kinds of things.
What's the key to then going from his role to then be, because now he's going to go from being the OC there, and now it's all his show. But what's the key to being a good offensive coordinator? And, what do you think the most important things are?
Well, I'll say this, just from my knowledge of what system they were running at Washington, they were in a 3-digit system, the old Norv Turner, right. Ernie's MPC 3-digit system. So there will be a whole new language being imparted there that some have heard and a lot haven't heard. They'll be learning a whole new offense there as they go to OTAs this year. And he will be teaching that to a group of coaches. Some have heard that. Juan Castillo has heard West Coast offensive terminology before, but then there's a whole bunch that haven't heard that. And so he'll have to be crossing the T's and dotting the I's about whether it's splits, whether it's stems on routes, whether it's paths for the back, whether it's telling the quarterback your eyes are here first and then they're here second, there's your check down third, everything. I mean, all the minutia is what he's going to have to get across.
And then also just in terms of general OC being a coordinator, how would you rank like the importance? Because people are going to focus on, well, did he call all the plays and under Andy, or, what is the most important thing as a coordinator in general?
Yeah, I think being able to have a good blend of play calling, and then being able to keep the defense off balance. Surely that's a huge effort. I mean, understanding that, hey, if they're killing you with the pass rush, you've got the great screen game, which Kansas City is known for. I mean, there's certain teaching points. Everybody screens, but there's certain teaching points that he will demand about what path the running back gets on, what path the offensive line get on as they start to head down the field, so they don't look like a bunch of drunken pirates as they're running out there. So, like I said, the minutia stuff, I think that's the important thing, and then developing a little rhythm. And you know what? I know he called plays in the preseason because that's how Andy was. He'd flip it to me once in a while. Hey, Brad, put a series together. So, it's not true that he's never called plays, right, because there's times where Andy's looking for suggestions. If you've been 3 and out a couple of times, you're kind of like, okay, but are you thinking anything, Eric? And Eric would at that point in time share those things with Andy. So I think that's an important part that people overlook.
And how, because I've always been impressed with Andy Reid with just he seems to seek out knowledge from many different places. How much does that help an offensive assistant? Am I right in that? And that he really seems to seek input.
He did. There was nobody that he didn't listen to, and it didn't make any difference if the guy was just an offensive assistant and he had been breaking down all of Cal Berkeley's film and seeing what they did that was interesting and unusual and might fit for us. So he loved new ideas and new thoughts, and does it fit for us? And as they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, but you have to have somebody that's doing that, and then you have to have somebody that's willing to take some of that information and stick it in their playbook.
How hard is it if you're if you're a quarterback's coach, the run game might be a challenge for you differently. If you're a running backs coach, maybe the pass game. So, as you said, there is an involvement in that. But what is the transition to go from kind of being around it to then putting it all together? Is that what do you need to make it work to be successful?
Yeah, I think you have to be good in front of the room, which his passion will reign through from the minute he first stands in front of that offensive group. And then you got to be able to present it the right way. You only have a limited time to install that many plays, both run and pass. And then you're going to have to make sure that you've coached your coaches up on all the small stuff that goes with those runs. That's why, you get an offensive line coach that you're familiar with. You get a wide receiver coach that you're familiar with. To me, that's as important as anything, because you are kind of outlining things, but in meetings before you even got to the team setting on Monday and Tuesday, you've been packaging all that stuff together so everybody has an understanding of what you're going to do.
Now, how important too is going back to that passion, and again, you've been in multiple roles. Andy seems to be a fairly calm guy. You were a fairly calm guy. Ron's a pretty, even keeled guy. Like, how important when you have EB like that to have somebody else kind of offsetting, and vice versa, to have someone who's maybe not as going to be right in your face, to have a guy like EB who can do that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Everybody has a different style. Some guys are screamers and yellers. Some guys are more, it's particularly the quarterback. You don't scream and yell at the quarterback. Generally, you bring him aside and whisper in his ear. So I don't think there's any doubt that he will adapt to that. You don't get a lot of getting in the quarterback's faces.
Right.
But there's other positions that respond, and then he's going to have to learn that roster and see, what it is that motivates each and every one of those guys.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think that passion here is going to work very well. What was his impact on Adrian Peterson?
Well, he really indoctrinated him into what a show pony, what a lead dog in the run game looks like in the National Football League. I'm trying to think who those guys would be now that are, they're not quite playing the game the same way, where you hand the ball 20 or 25 times. So just all the preparation, that, how you take care of your body. Here's what you do on off days. I mean, it's a whole different animal when you only play 11 or 12 in college, and then all of a sudden you get to Thanksgiving, you still got, 6 or 8 more. It's important to, first of all, have a coach that's been there before. And Eric certainly has done that, having to get himself ready for a Wednesday practice. And then a guy like Tony Richardson, that Eric was coaching as well, was a guy that had a long career, did a great job of taking care of his body, and was able to model some things for Adrian Peterson. And Eric was able to direct Tony to share those things with AP. And then you saw him kind of run with the ball, literally.
How much would he push him in practice?
Oh, he would push him. I mean, whether it was ball security, whether it was running away from a handoff because he's trying to use his speed to circle the defense, talk to him about course integrity. I mean, he got every ounce of juice, even though he was a tremendous player in his own right. I mean, he got everything out of him every day and every game.
Are you surprised that he's kind of had to travel this path, or did you think he would have been a head coach earlier?
No, I thought
by now, I should say, not yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought he would have been by now. But, I got to tell you something interesting, John. I sat at a table with an owner sitting right next to me. He shall remain nameless. And it was back when they were talking about the Rooney Rule. Herm Edwards got up and gave a great, talk to everybody in the room. It was upcoming assistants. It was head coaches. It was owners. It was general managers. I sat next to an owner and I said, "Hey, did you get a chance to see my videotape?" And the guy said, yeah, I saw it. I was familiar with it. And he ended up hiring another guy. And I said, can you give me any pointers on anything you were looking for that you didn't see, that I could do better, And he says, "You want to be honest with me?" And I said, "Yeah, I absolutely want you to be honest with me." And he said, "Yeah," he says, "I couldn't get by the mustache." And I was speechless, because I'm not shaving my mustache. I've had a mustache since forever. So when you talk about Eric not being able to have an opportunity, you just don't know what are in those guys' minds and what exactly it is they're looking for. And I appreciated that coach, that owner's honesty, but you talk about hitting you right between the eyes. Now that was really a revelation.
I'll have to admit, that's not what I thought he would have said to you. Like, of all the things that you could have said, here are 10 things he may have said, I would not have picked that one. I've never heard that one before, but you're right. Like, you never know what they're thinking. I've heard guys here where they'll say, candidate X was by far the best interview, but they hired someone else because they already knew going in that this was the guy they're going to hire.
Yeah. It's not supposed to happen that way. I mean, by design, that's why it's, so they could embrace all comers as they come in the door. But hopefully we're taking baby steps toward alleviating that. Although probably the past 20 years would tell you that they're very baby steps.
The last thing then, you were also on that staff with Ron Rivera, saying I'm sure you know him well. And like now Eric's joining this staff. What do you, first of all, what kind of coach do you think Ron Rivera is? And this is clearly a big year for both those men.
Yeah, so Ron was in a tough situation because Jim Johnson was a lifelong defensive guy, a linebacker guy. At some point, he coached a defensive line, but basically a linebacker guy. So he was very hard on Ron. But it was good, because that was a guy that was coming from professional football, really hadn't coached before, and basically he had to impart that knowledge and teach him exactly how to do everything. So he learned it, kind of at the knees of Jim Johnson, and then his own career took off. He was able to go to Chicago and obviously on to San Diego. But I think those two having been together and following each other throughout the years, they've been in a lot of the same rooms. They've been in a lot of the same meetings as you go to the combine. But I think they'll work tremendously together. And I think they'll do a great job of offsetting each other's strengths.
I apologize. I did have one more, because what you know about that offense, and I don't know how much you know about Washington's roster. Have you watched much of them at all? The skill talent and all that?
I really haven't. I know there'll be some base concepts that he starts with. I mean, it's going to feel like they're drinking out of a fire hose, I'm sure, that offense as they start there. But there'll be base concepts. And then certainly you got to look and see, hey, what can your offensive line accomplish? I'd like to do this. What can your quarterback accomplish? Is he good? Does he need to be on the move? Is he a pocket guy? Can we quarter roll him? I think he's going to evaluate all that stuff. I know he's probably, knee deep in looking at all that film right now about who are these guys, who's coming back, who we're not sure is coming back. But I think there's enough variety that they'll be able to use those guys' strengths to their advantage.
And what's the key to making that offense in general work?
I would say, number one, decision-making. The second thing would be accuracy. I think that's huge. I mean, you can forget about how big an arm a guy's got. Is he accurate with the football? And is he throwing it to the right guy and making good decisions? And then if you're playing good defense, I mean, Eric, particularly having coached the running backs before, having respect for the football and not giving it to the other team. I mean, he'll impart that through and through on that offensive side of the ball.
Brad, I appreciate your time and your insight. Great stuff. And thank you very much.
You're welcome, John.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Brad for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back on Thursday, late Thursday afternoon, with another podcast, wrapping up our first impressions of meeting Eric Bienemy after his press conference. Talk to you next time.